This video will provide an overview of the SOAPSonar test variable capabilities. We will continue using the same test API example that we've used in the quick start, which is the pet store API. First, we load the pet store API document. Once loaded, we're going to use two different API operations. One operation to store pet information in the pet store and another operation to retrieve that information. Let's choose the Add a New Pet to the Store operation and create a test case which presents the graphical input form that we can use to build our JSON message. We could also choose to configure our settings directly in raw JSON format instead of the form input. Before continuing, let's explore where variables are accessible from and how you use them in SOAPSonar. One of the primary variable types in SOAPSonar is global variables. Global variables can be defined on an instance basis from the Settings and Preferences menu under the Global Variables tab. These variables apply to this installation of SOAPSonar across all loaded projects. You can set up variables for values such as the IP address or other environmental aspects that are specific to this SOAPSonar installation machine, which can be used across projects. You can define variables manually, or you can enter them into a file as name-value pairs. SOAPSonar support password definitions in global variables, which will obfuscate the actual values so that you can utilize global password variables, but not reveal the actual sensitive values in the interface. The View Current Variables tab will show you the aggregate variables that are defined for the SOAPSonar instance. You can automatically generate global variable files at particular locations and have SOAPSonar automatically access them to initiative the global variables when it runs the tests. There are also project-level global variables. In the policy tree, under Configuration Policy Settings, you'll see there's a Project Globals tab where we can define the global variables that are scoped to the loaded project and stored within the saved project file. For our example, we will create a variable called petName and call our petName Abby. On the View Current Variables tab, we can see all of the SOAPSonar global variables that we were looking at a moment ago, as well as our new variable Abby that is stored as a project global. We can copy the variable names into the clipboard if we choose to from this location via right-click, or choose the global variable from the context menu anywhere entries and values can be defined in SOAPSonar, ranging from the URI, header, body, tasks, etc. Anywhere you can enter text, you can right-click or click on the context menu and see different types of test variable options, including the global variables we recently created and viewed. And we can see our global variable called petName here that we just provisioned a moment ago. Let's review some of the other variable types while we're at this section. Context function variables are functions that can be run as inputs. For example, if you want to create a current timestamp with a particular format or a unique global identifier, or retrieve contents from a file and inject into the text, or create a random number or base64 encode, some data and more. We will cover the automatic data function functions and data source functions in a subsequent video as these apply to data-driven testing. Runtime variables we will explore next. Entering in the data for our test, we will use our global variable that we've defined for the pet name and then enter in the additional information, such as the identifier. Let's call it 54,321. For the category ID, we can use 3, 4, 5. We will set the category name to SOAPSonar, and the status of our pet is going to be available. Now that the test is provisioned with our values, we can go ahead and send this off to the API and see the response. The response indicates no errors and that our information has been consumed by the Pet Store API. Now we will set up a type of SOAPSonar variable called Runtime variable. You will notice we have both a Runtime variable tab on the request and a Runtime variable tab on the response, both of which allow us to capture dynamically information that we are either sending out or retrieving in order to variabilize it and make it dynamic such that we can use it in subsequent test cases. In this example, we will capture the ID and create the runtime variable by clicking on it, right-clicking, and adding a variable reference. We will name this runtime variable pet ID. You can see a runtime variable association has been created in the runtime variable format that associates it to this test case. The captured value right now is 54321, but since this is a runtime variable, the value will be dynamically captured each time the test case is run. Now that we have that runtime variable defined, we can go to another test case, the Find by ID test case. We will create a new test case for this operation. The API operation requires us to send in a pet ID. Rather than setting a manual value 54321, we will right-click and choose a runtime variable, and our runtime variables are now shown in the pull-down menu for any that have been created in the project. The variable from the test case from the Pet Store operation we just saved is visible, which allows us to create a variable reference to pet ID and associate that to be resolved when the test is run. We now can run this test case and look at the Sent Request tab to see what got actually sent out to the API with all the variables resolved. We can see 54321 was the resolution of the runtime variable. The Pet Store API responds with our entry that we added a moment ago. Now, if we want to put this then all together with a test scenario that does both an add and a retrieval, we can do so in Run View. Using the test case that has the runtime variable, SOAPSonar will automatically recognize that the test case has a dependency on a test that it's retrieving the runtime variable from and add that to the sequence. The sequence created has the dependent test needed to get the runtime variable value and the actual test to use it. Let's run our test suite. Looking at the report view of the test results, we can see that our ID 54321 is retrieved using the value that comes back in our ID from the runtime variable. The pet name, remember, was originally derived from a global variable, and then ultimately the runtime variable was used also to invoke the second test case. This quick example has demonstrated how to utilize test variables anywhere in the interface where you can enter text values, ranging from headers, body, URI, success criteria, and tasks.